Welcome back to a Buffalo Football Monday. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you here on One Bills Live, and pleased to welcome in my broadcast partner on the Bills Radio Network. It's former center Eric Wood, also host of the Center on Buffalo podcast. And Eric Wood's appearance is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup. Big, craveable favorites collide in Chunky Soup's new Mac line, featuring flavors like Buffalo-style Chicken Mac, Chili Dog Mac, and Beefy Mac. Stock up for game day now at your local Wegmans. Chunky soup that eats like a meal. All right, Eric. Obviously not the result that anyone wanted last night as the 14-game regular season home winning streak comes to an end. But as we say all the time, to beat the Bills at home, they've got to help you. And the Bills were all too generous in helping the Patriots last night.
They were. And we talked on the pregame, one of my keys to the game was, don't let special teams become a factor. You got Marcus Jones, this explosive returner. We have a new punter in Wisnowski where, could punting or holding become an issue? And I thought for the most part, the special teams played excellent last night. We don't necessarily make any explosive plays, but when you look at special teams for the Bills this year, if they play every game as called a wash, that's going to be a winning formula for them. Turnovers became the issue last night for the Bills and penalties. Turnovers, you have the red zone interception that Josh Allen threw. He said it after the game. That's just bad football. Now, his receivers are blanketed. He's trying to make a play. And we're not even in that position. We're actually at a 3rd and 1 if we don't get an offensive PI, which brings back to, everything working in unison and correlation throughout a football game. That interception does not happen if we don't have a PI on the previous play. And then the 2 fumbles are, that's an anomaly for the Bills. They haven't had a lost fumble since the Ravens game in the regular season game of last year. So this is a team that has taken care of the football in a big-time way. And unfortunately, last night they put the ball on the turf twice, and both times it's recovered by the Patriots. And so, they did plenty to beat themselves, and offensively really struggled to get in a rhythm. Sean McDermott talked about that in his press conference after the game. But I believe a major point of that is simply the penalties. Yes, you have the turnovers, but the Bills have been averaging 6.1 yards per play on the season heading into the Patriots game. In the first half, they only scored 3 points. First time they've been held without a touchdown in the first half in forever. We've scored on our opening possession in all 4 games this season, but because of turnovers and penalties, we don't get to that 30-point mark. We only put up 3 points in the first half. Give the defense credit in the first half. They were able to hold the Patriots to only 6 points and keep us in that football game. But the penalties just completely ruined the flow of the game. And yes, that's a ticky-tack crew. We knew it coming in. We talked on the pregame broadcast, Chris, about how John Hockley and his crew, they like to get on TV. They like to hear their voice heard. I mean, they even like giving explanations of the penalties and why. You don't often get the why from officials. We were getting it last night at times. All that being said, Bills still found themselves in a position to win the game at the end, and the Patriots made the plays. And we'll get to this, but sometimes you have to tip the cap to the opponent. Stephon Diggs came back in and made some incredible plays. There's times where he has too much cushion. I get it. There's other times where he's blanketed. He's falling out of bounds. He's got barely his toes in bounds, and he's making contested catches along the sideline and really showing up for his second-year quarterback.
Certainly this is a game that the Bills, it was a division game against the team that you really feel is going to chase you all season. So it's a tough one to lose, no question about it, particularly at home in an environment with the whiteout last night. By the way, the fans got the memo, right? Everybody jumped on board with it. Tough game to lose. But by the same token, it's also an illustration of how tough the Bills are to beat. 3 turnovers, -2 on the turnover margin, 8 penalties in the first half alone. 2 of those turnovers were in the red zone. The Bills fumbled it with Keon in their own end, deep end, and Josh threw a pick down deep in the Patriots' end. So both of those turnovers were absolutely critical. You get Steph Diggs making about 3, I think, at least 2 on the sidelines, incredible one-time only catches, and he almost had 3 of them in this game alone. And Drake May does some stuff that really was impressive for a young quarterback, moving out of bounds, getting rid of the football, making some throws that were outstanding. All of that stuff goes into the mix for a 3-point win. That's how tough this Bills team really is to play, and that's why I think rightfully so. If they stick to their process, just play a little better and cut out the mistakes, they really don't have to alter course too much.
No, especially on the offensive side of the football. I don't necessarily have any concerns. I'm not saying I don't think there's scheme things offensively. I don't think it's a personnel thing. Of course there's going to be walls on offense throughout a game. You're not going to have many perfect games like we saw against New England in the playoffs where you just rip off a touchdown on every single drive. I mean, there's going to be walls throughout a game. You're playing against an NFL opponent. It is what it is. But offensively, it's cutting out those mistakes. And, Sean McDermott said after the game, they got a little too cute. And, the number one offensive coordinator in the NFL last year who got the Chicago Bears job, Ben Johnson, there's times he runs cute stuff that doesn't work and, makes you look like a fool in the moment. And there's a lot of times you run things and it results in big plays. It keeps the defense guessing. It gives teams something to prepare for the following week where they can't just hone in on your base stuff each and every week. I'm not saying we need to specialize in being cute, quotes, but I see where there's a time and a place for those within a football game. And so offensively, no. Are there some concerns about the defense? Yes. Do those get 100% fixed when you get Ogunjobi and Hoyt back or Harrison back? No, not necessarily. This is also a defense that it's been a couple years of transition with a lot of new players, guys that are, gaining experience out there, and a Cole Bishop and some of these young defensive linemen. You got new guys on the edge and Bosa who's working himself into this scheme. And so I think this defensive unit can continue to get better throughout the season. But you talk about complementary football, the rush matching the coverage, and I thought there was times last night where the pass rush was going to get home and it wasn't good enough on the back end. And then there was other times it was vice versa. And, one of the concerning things to me, we talked about on the broadcast last night, Chris, was New England in the second half, and Drake May goes 13-14 in the second half, 6 for 6 in the fourth quarter. But they were keeping 7 guys in to pass protect. They did not respect our interior pass rush. They said, okay, our interior could block your interior. We're going to chip both the defensive ends and make it really easy on these tackles to get some pass protection here. And if we only have 3 guys out on a route because we have the quarterback plus 7 protectors, if we only have 3 guys out there, we're pretty confident that one of them can get open, or Drake May can buy some time and then make a play to be able to get them open. And that's where we just didn't necessarily have an answer for it, because we were getting outmanned. I don't think that the calls were wrong per se, but watching that unfold in the second half, and me and Chris into the booth, and we're seeing the same thing. The Bills coaches are seeing. It's just there's some concerns there, and so on the back end, I think we continue to get better as this group plays together. But you had a night last night where it felt like at times you could kind of tell what was coming, but you just couldn't get it done on the back end.
Right, and I think that's why Bills fans are concerned. And look, I'm not putting this game on the defense at all. They get a ball.
No, they kept us in it. They truly kept us in it.
Yeah,
that was
the
first half where it could have got away from you.
Yeah, I'm not putting it on them at all. I mean, they get off the field on third down. Patriots go 3 for 9 on third down. They get 2 red zone stops, including after a turnover on their own 10-yard line, hold them to a field goal there. I mean, they did everything they could, and I think what people need to remember is this is a Bills defense that is severely undermanned due to injury and suspension, and I'm not trying to be an apologist for that, but I think Bills fans would take that game from Buffalo's defense any day of the week, holding them to 20 until a last-second field goal, because your offense should be good enough to outscore them in that situation. The offense is what really let them down last night, in my opinion. And I want to talk to you about this because I felt like one thing that the Patriots defense did very well was to disguise coverage and not give Josh Allen consistent man versus zone pre-snap indicators. And I think it left him hesitant and unsure as to where he was going with the football at the snap. And I think it led to him leaving the pocket prematurely on some plays when he did have players open if he just waited another half a second.
Yeah, the one was late in the game where he scrambles out of the pocket early to his right. And, for every time he does that, it makes a remarkable play. You can't say, "Hey, Josh, sit in the pocket all the time," because you know when that if he sees out of the corner of his eye that the right defensive end loses contain, that's where Josh is at his best. That's where we've seen him make some of the greatest plays of his career. On that particular play, though, if he stands in the pocket, he's going to have an open receiver, likely for a touchdown down the field on a great play design. That one didn't work out at that moment. We have to settle for a field goal. And so I do think that this defense and the Patriots defense in general has matched up pretty well against the Bills. You know, they have two good cornerbacks on the outside. You can attack the middle of the field, but they mix up coverages enough and they, muddy it up in the middle of the field enough because they got two good corners on the outside that it makes those throwing lanes tight. I think there was times last night where we weren't getting enough separation in man-to-man coverage. And then there were times where, without hearing it from Josh or necessarily watching it back on film. We saw it unfold live and we could feel it. But, I'd kind of like to hear that from Josh's words or Joe Brady's words that he became hesitant in those instances. But I do feel like it felt like one of those games where, okay, it's not going that smooth. All right, now I'm going to put this ball in my hands and I'm fine with that. But we saw Josh get his knee dinged up at one point in the game where he's limping around. And this early in the season, we don't necessarily need a 9 carry for 53 yards rushing performance from Josh, especially when they're not designed runs where, okay, we're designing it to go here where you could funnel yourself out of bounds or where the defenders are coming from. You take off in the middle of the defense, and that's where we saw Josh take some pretty good hits in the game last night. And so all that being said, the pass game, there are bright spots. Kincaid, second most receiving yards in the NFL for a tight end. There's been times where we've had to rely on at the end of the Ravens game and, you light the world on fire. But for the most part, it seems like we're having to work pretty hard to be able to get those yards down the field. And I'm not putting it on the receivers. I'm not necessarily putting it on Josh. I'm not saying the protection's not good enough. It's just a combination of those things.
Yeah, and it looks very disjointed.
Yeah. How'd the offensive line play against the Patriots?
Again, not copping out, but without watching the film, I thought at times they did well, especially in pass protection. I thought that Christian Barmore had a really good game up front for the Patriots, which is, saying that at times he was getting off blocks. The run game with the running backs last night averages right around 3 yards a carry, give or take, 0.1 either way. Can't remember exactly how it shook out. We were tracking it in the fourth quarter. Josh Allen makes the rushing total look better than it actually was last night. But a lot of that's because of the penalties and the way the game unfolded. But when you get to 2nd and 6, you're balanced. Now you get a procedural penalty, you get a PI, whatever it may be, and now you're back at 2nd and 11. It's hard to run the football when you assume, a good run's 4 to 5 yards, and now you're sitting at a 3rd and medium, 3rd and long. And so now you're in the pass situations again. Had those penalties not happen, if we were able to continue to throw body blows at them and then potentially break those bigger runs, maybe the rushing output with the running backs looks different. But I thought the offensive line was fine last night. I didn't see any glaring concerns out of them up front. The one sack that Williams got, Milton Williams, it looked like a protection breakdown. We could hear in our headset during the game, looked like Josh set the protection left. David Edwards and Deion Dawkins are 2-on-1 on the left-hand side, and we have 3 blockers for 4 guys. Williams comes to block, but we don't even have a guy for him in that situation. So I don't necessarily put that one on the O-line.
Right.
Knowing some of the matchup concerns on defense, because they're as shorthanded as they are, and we doubt that Milano is going to be back in the lineup this next week after re-aggravating the pec. We'll see. And knowing the skill position talent that the Atlanta Falcons have, not to mention the fact that they're coming off a bye week and have had an extra week to prepare for the Bills, what is your level of concern for them defensively, matchup-wise, knowing that there's going to be an awful lot of focus on stopping Bijan Robinson, and then you have Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts in matchup situations in the passing game?
Yeah, you're going to have to try and confuse a young quarterback in Penix, and whether that's with some different pressure looks. We've seen Tom McDermott and Bobby Babbitt be more aggressive with certain blitz packages against younger quarterbacks, just understanding they don't, at that time of their career, likely have the answers all figured out to those, mixing with coverages to try and cloud those up down the field. And then it's got to be a big game from the defensive line. When the secondary's banged up, the second level of your defense banged up, the defensive line's got to come to play. Hopefully you get Ed Oliver back this week. Hopefully you get a TJ Sanders back this week that can, fortify that front up there. But it's going to have to be a big game for Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinosa, those guys on the edge. And we've seen flashes and some bright spots from those guys, but they're going to have to be more disruptive to help out that secondary, that second level of the defense. And they're going to have to play a big game this week. Bijan Robinson, we were talking on the roundtable yesterday, and I made the point that based upon age, workload throughout the career, there might not be anybody in the league I would take over James Cook. And then I corrected myself and said, well, probably Bijan Robinson, just being realistic. But he was also the 5th pick in the draft, and he's a big-time talent coming out of Texas. And so Bills are going to have their hands full defensively. This is a unit that plays really well when Penix plays well. And he's had one really good game this year. They looked really good. And he's had a few bad ones. And, they have the bye week to do some self-scouting. A lot of times you go in the bye week and you hope you don't have a week 5 bye, but they had the week 5 bye. So you have 4 games sample size to say, here's where we're at. This is what we're good at. This is what we're going to lean into. And so Bills are going to get a strong effort from the Falcons. And, you get Monday Night Football primetime, and all those Falcons guys are going to be thinking, look, the Patriots just shocked them. This team isn't unbeatable.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster for the Falcons. They lost a close one to Tampa Bay on opening day. Then they blew out the Minnesota Vikings 22-6, then got crushed by the Panthers 0-30. And then they won this last week or 2 weeks ago against the Washington Commanders. They beat them by a touchdown. But then they're coming off a bye week, so they're going to be fresh. What's a step you'd like to see? What's something that you'd like to see from the Bills' offense going forward that maybe they've been good at and maybe haven't done enough, or anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, for me, it's eliminating the pre-snap penalties. Yeah, continue to lean into the run game, but not necessarily be predictable with the run game. Establish the run game, and when you get the right boxes, get to your play action game. Josh Allen under center and play action this year has been excellent. Those tight ends are matchup nightmares. Lean into that, and then, whether it's 11 personnel or whatever it may be, figure out your looks. We can certainly run the football out of that personnel group as well. And, we've well established how we've been able to compromise teams with our 13 personnel. Is there, a package out of 11 personnel too, where we still lean into the run game? Maybe it's not all shotgun, and we're working some matchups that way as well. But to me, offensively, the biggest thing is just not hurting yourselves, making smart decisions with the football, securing the football, and not having penalties, because when they could stay on schedule, one of the best offense in the league, if not the best offense in the league. And then defensively, we saw an improvement from the run defense this week against New England. Continue to hit your run fits, be physical, chase the backside like we saw Rousseau do at the start last night for a tackle for a loss. They were physical. They played downhill. Okay. Well, what's that takeaway from the pass defense? Did we commit to stopping the run so much that we gave up some down the field? In the pass defense, I truly think this pass rush has just got to get home more consistently, and I'm not putting it all on the front 4. Is there second-level defenders we may need to bring? Is there different looks that we could give opposing offenses to muddy those, cloud up those looks down the field to get guys in a better position to make plays?
Eric, thanks for the time as always. We'll see you down in the ATL later this week.
Okay, sounds good. Looking forward to it, guys.